Now, okay, today, here we are welcoming our historian and author and our Bartow resident, Lloyd Harris, to present to us on the Polk County Historical Commission. We're celebrating an anniversary. The Polk County Historical Commission is 80 years old. So Lloyd's going to take us back in time and talk about that 80-year history. But for just a second, I'm going to talk about Lloyd's, well, not 80-year history, but just about Lloyd, who he is. Lloyd is a third-generation Bartowan with an intense interest in local history. If y'all hadn't noticed that, it's intense. He's the author of the book in the Images of America series about
Bartow.
Which,
Bartow.
by the way, Bartow.
Way back there.
And it's on sale downstairs. Lloyd engages in a variety of public speaking and research opportunities and that expand on his knowledge of Polk County history. He serves the Polk County Historical Commission in a new capacity that was developed this past year. And when special research projects come up for the commission, Lloyd is their historian. So he does research for the Polk County Historical Commission. He served on the Polk County Historical Commission since 2003 and served as commissioner as well as chairman. He is a charter member and director emeritus of the Polk County Historical Association. And let me tell you by day, y'all probably may know this, you may not. He's Army instructor, Army Junior ROTC at Summerlin Academy in Bartow, where he's taught leadership education for over 23 years. I had the opportunity to visit Lloyd just this past week and walk through the academy. It's an amazing thing. So raise your hand if you've been there. You been there? Go visit it.
You're all invited.
It's amazing.
Tuesdays and Wednesdays are the best days.
And one of the things that was just so great about that day, I met this lovely young student. She's a freshman. Freshman student. And she was on the range with him learning to shoot and do all kinds of exciting things. And Lloyd, take just a second and tell us about this amazing student. She's competing.
Well, she's on the rifle team. We have a competitive .177 air rifle marksmanship team that fires in a sporter division. She is of such quality and perfection that she will be the first young lady that will field into what we call the precision rifle team, which upgrades to an Olympic style rifle. And so it puts her in a whole category that will prepare her for collegiate scholarships, not just military, but NCAA recognizes at least 23 universities and colleges rifle marksmanship as a sport. So she and her family are all into it. And she just started this year. So it's not something that her family inculcated into her since birth. It's something she obtained, this desire and discipline with marksmanship and shooting rifles at our school, and she is great. Her name is Lee Marie Colon. I tell her that she's a descendant of Cristobal Colon, which is Christopher Columbus. She smiles. I told her if she gets 3 dogs, she'll name them Nina, Pinta, and Santa Maria.
Isn't that a great story? Go visit it. It's an amazing, amazing place. So, okay, well, Lloyd, tell us a little bit about the Polk County Historical Commission.
I would be glad to do it. How many on May the 4th at school, May the 4th, every year comes around, and especially since the mid-1970s, you hear the moniker, May the 4th be with you. How many have heard that? Well, you know, it relates to Star Wars and that great movie, but I'm going to tell you something that's going to be embedded in your mind from here out, that whenever you hear of May the 4th be with you, is going to relate to none other than your very own Polk County Historical Commission. Because on May the 4th, 1937, the state legislature of Florida gave birth to the Polk County Historical Commission. So give me just a second. Let's go through this. 80th anniversary, May the 4th. Now we're a little bit after May the 4th, but this is the month of May, and so we're celebrating 80 great years A firm future built on a great past. And so I kind of chose that as our motto for today, and that I stole it from the Polk County Centennial Days, which you'll get to see some photos and pictures. We're going to go through the old family album. You know what's great is when you used to visit Grandma and you get out the old pictures and you look at them and you ask Grandma or Granddad, well, who is that and what was that and where did this happen? Well, I'm going to do the same thing for you today, but we're going to be talking the Polk County Historical Commission. Now, the commission right now presently is part of the Parks and Recreation Department. Is that correct, Murtis? Parks and Natural Resources Division within your county government. The Polk County, let's go back. The Polk County Historical Commission was created by Florida legislature on May the 4th, 1937, and it was the result of historically minded citizens of Polk County interested in preserving the historical background of a very growing community. Now, the purpose of the Historical Commission was stated as this. It was to be an advisory board to the county commission on anything historical. The duties of the Historical Commission were back then and are today to collect, arrange, record, preserve historical materials and data, to appoint a historian to erect monuments recognizing places in Polk County where historical events have transpired, to record all historical data, and to sponsor a Polk County Historical Association. Now, historical commissioners originally were appointed by the governor. That is actually an appointment that's recorded upstairs from 1955 to a guy named Edward Keenan, who was from Frostproof. And everything I read about him, he's styled as a major, so he must have been a retired military fellow. Everybody received one of those if you were on the commission, an appointment by the governor, until 1996. In 1996, gubernatorial selections and appointments were given back to the power of the county. The state was, burdensome. They gave it back to us. The Historical Commission additionally serves as an advisory commission to the executive director and staff of the museum and library, and we would know that as the History Center and all things historically centric to our county. So let's look back. You see Edward Keenan there. Let's look at the founder of all this greatness. The Historical Commission recognizes Milton D. Wilson. Now, he was born in 1886 and lived until 1956 as our founder. He served more than 30 years as a county attorney here in Polk County, and he was largely responsible for creation of the Polk County Historical Commission. I understand that in 1936, he is the fellow that prompted the legislative act which gave birth to the Historical Commission. He was very interested and keenly aware of the need to preserve our history as this county was transitioning from a rural economy into a burgeoning society. He was appointed to the Historical Commission at its very beginning, May the 4th, and served as its chairman until his death. He also was an original, by nature of his job, the fellow that was considered the county historian. Now, back then, the commission was made up entirely of the Board of County Commissioners, not like today. Back then, if you were a county commissioner, you were automatically appointed to the Historical Commission, and Milton Wilson, of course, was the chairman of that particular branch. He was assisted ably by Miss Lillian Rosa Carpenter. She was born in 1890 and lived to 1967. She is rightly considered the co-founder of the Historical and Genealogical Library. She was appointed as the associate, or as an associate historical commissioner. Now, her works form a large part of the local histories that you will research if you go to our library's collections. She served for many years as Polk County's deputy circuit court clerk. She used her typing skills, and get this, manual typewriter, to transcribe volumes of material and data. I was talking to Dorinda before we started this afternoon, and I was just reflecting on when you go to the library and you pull a file and it's all typed, probably 80% of the time it's going to be Miss Lillian's work. She would sit and go through newspapers and type, retype, transcribe articles. She did the census. She would go down and take a census on microfilm and transcribe it to paper. I mean, that is something that I can't even imagine doing. Now today, most of that information can be found online. But for more than 5 decades, she provided a source to the Genealogical and Historical Library. Her cataloging abilities, her personal recollections, her organizational talents made the library one of the very best archival and research libraries in the southeastern United States. She was considered, during her lifetime, one of Polk County's leading authorities on history. In 1940, the Historical Commission's repository of historical records was made available to the WPA, the Works Progress Administration's Historical Records Survey, supplementing the state archives. The Historical Library was officially established the same year, and it was the first and foremost endeavor associated with and by the Historical Commission. So 1940, Dorinda, is your birthday at the library. There you go. From 1937 to 1955, the targeted goal was simply this: to establish the historical library and its collections. So microfilms were purchased, volumes of different books, county histories were purchased. Lillian was pecking away with that typewriter, transcribing all those volumes of vast information to make the library what it has become today. It consisted of a collection of national, state, county, local, military, tribal, archaeological, genealogical works, maps, photographs, magazines, privately published family records. Resources were made by, donations were made possible by generous citizens, hereditary societies, and associations. By 1955, the Historical Library was located in rooms on the southeast corner of the 3rd floor of the 1908 courthouse. The first library was embedded in an adjunct to the law library. So wherever the law library was at is where the Historical Library was located. At that time, it was still in use by the court system. In 1956, a marker committee was established. Now, the marker committee erected 7 historical markers in Polk County and 1 in Glades County. The markers identified events and places associated with the Seminole Indian Wars. Now, those markers were located at Fort Arbuckle, Fort Meade, Fort Clinch, Fort Fraser, Fort Carroll, the Billy Bowlegs grave site in Glades County, Fort Cummings, Fort Gardner, and that encompassed the different Seminole Indian war sites in Florida. Now, as I was reading through the minutes, the power behind the marker system or marker program back then was probably, you've guessed it, Major Edward Keenan, the guy whose certificate I showed you, probably a retired military man. The County Commission. This is the Historical Commission in 1958. In the 1950s, the Historical Commission took the lead in celebration of the county's first 100 years. It was Polk County's Century in the Sun, and it began with a historical quote, "It's a great day to be in Polk County." That was reiterated by celebrants 100 years earlier on February the 8th, 1861, when the county was founded, when an area once part of Hillsborough and Brevard counties was designated to form a new county in Florida named for President James K. Polk. Now, Commissioner Wallace Story, who's not on there but was a county commissioner, is the fellow that prompted in 1958 the idea that, hey, in 3 years, we're going to be 100 years old and let's celebrate. So the Historical Commission took the ball and they began to run with it. So an executive committee was formed. It was headed by Aldine Comby and Al McFadden, along with a general committee under the initial direction of Robert J. Eastman and later C.C. Street. Other members were, and you can look at them from left to right here, J.B. Thornhill, L.W. Dunson, Julian Durrance, and Floyd Woods. Now, others who were picked to be on the Centennial Commission were Mrs. Mary Campbell, Roy Gladney, E.L. Davis, Robert Jarrell, C.A. Thompson, J.F. Mulling, and George Williamson. Now, the Centennial celebration, I would say in my research, was the crown jewel of the Polk County Historical Commission's endeavors, right up there as a celebration. Of course, the entities that they created, the History Center here, and the ongoing programs throughout the county are the descendants of those decisions. But this centennial celebration was one that touched a lot of folks, including me. Now, it was called Century in the Sun. The first event that took place was a very grand centennial parade on, yes, February the 8th, 1961. Hundreds of citizens were attired in colorful costumes reminiscent of the 1800s. Men sported beards of all shapes and all sizes. Women wore gingham dresses, ox-drawn carts, hound dogs, children in parade attire, vintage bicycles, horse-drawn carriages and buggies, wagons, fire departments, bucket brigades, Native Americans, military units, bands, and scores of others celebrated the pioneer spirit, and it all started on February the 8th, 1961, which, as I recall, was a very chilly day. Now, this, two grandparents and a fourth grade history teacher are the ones who prompted me to be here where I'm at, and Miss Louise Frisbee and her articles in the Polk County Democrat. But if you will look right here, and I know that you can't hardly see it. See that red dot? See the red dot right there? That is me. So, I'm easy to pick out for myself because, number one, I knew where I was at on that day. Number two, I was so short that I couldn't see the parade. And so Granddad said, hop up on the hood of the car. It was a Rambler. And so I sat on the hood of the car right in front of what was then known as Tate Phillips Hardware and observed the entire parade. And so it was quite an impact on a young fellow that was 6 or 7 years old. And I've loved history ever since. Well, this was taken outside of Bartow. It's kind of dark because I used it for a newspaper image. But a log replica was built on the lawn of the courthouse as Centennial Headquarters #1. This is where everything was headquartered there. It was a replica of where the court was first held. It actually was an early schoolhouse in Bartow that was used for court, church, and school. And it was built there and became the Centennial Polk County Historical Commission's headquarters for the Centennial celebration. It actually was built by the same firm who built the very first courthouse in Bartow, named McCauley, out of Fort Meade. But the thing that's unique about this celebration is that it was year-long. It wasn't just one parade in Bartow. There was a county-wide celebratory program. It included centennial rodeos, air shows, boat shows, water ski tournaments, parades, beard contests, beauty contests, fishing contests, fiddling contests, fireworks, sporting events including baseball, golf, tennis, and boating events, horse shows, picnics, and pioneer recognition days, including a Native Sons and Daughters parade, which included Frances Langford Evinrude. Frances Langford, the very famous movie star and singer from World War II era, came all the way back to Lakeland and to Bartow to celebrate. Spessard Holland, General Albert Blanding, General Van Fleet, and other notables came, and if you were a native son or daughter dating to such and such a year, you were in the parade. Now, that wasn't this parade. That was another parade about mid-year, and that parade started in Bartow, and wound its way out Highway 60 all the way to Bartow's Peace River Park, where a grand celebration again was there to feat the senior pioneers of our county and the notables. Well, let's look at some pictures. I'm not in this picture. Now, in the log courthouse, you could buy all these items, except one. This came out at the end of the year, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But you could buy hats, you could buy bow ties, you could buy the Centennial booklet, the official Century in the Sun history of Polk County that was published under the auspices of the Polk County Historical Commission. And my aunt gave me one in that same year, and I've been hooked on Polk County history ever since. These are girls, including the Dubberly kids, and they appeared later in a grand celebration, an operetta-type production called Century in the Sun that was held in November of that year at Bartow's Peace River Park. And that was the grand day there. Everybody was dressed up, and it wasn't only in Bartow, throughout the county. You had Francis Langford there on Native Sons and Daughters Day. April of the centennial year, Reverend Billy Graham came to Polk County and preached to a crowd of around 25 to 30,000 people at Bartow's Peace River Park for Easter celebration. This is Guy Lombardo in the bottom here, and his Royal Canadians entertained Polk Countyans. Miss Nellie Innes, I think was her name, is the Centennial Queen. Of course, beard contest. And the official Polk County float figured in the inauguration parade of Ferris Bryant that year. Of course, everywhere people were in the theme and the celebration. Some of the beards. Notice the pins here. They said Polk County, of which we got one over here. This was the Brotherhood of the Brush. If you chose not to grow a beard and you were caught, you would be put in jail and had to pay a token to get out. But you also were given one of these little chicken pins right here to show that you were too chicken if you were a guy to grow that beard. So, you know, they had all kinds of fun stuff. And the great fun was that it just didn't happen right here in Bartow, but it was everywhere. Native Sons and Daughters, that is General Blanding. This is Mr. Evinrude, who was the husband of Frances Langford, Mary Holland, the wife of the senator, native son special with Spessard Holland, sitting right there. And that's at the outdoor celebration at Bartow's Peace River Park. Now, if you're not familiar with that, that's where the girls' villa is located today on east on Highway 60. This is a celebration in Winter Haven. I don't know if I'd want to go to Winter Haven or not because it looks like you could get your head stuck. There were everywhere throughout the county, much like the pirates who invade Tampa during the Gasparilla celebration. Here in Polk County, brush brigades is what the newspaper called them, the Lakeland Ledger, by the way, called them brush brigades, and they would come and try to take over City Hall. And just like they do in Tampa with the pirates. So in Lakeland, they were lucky enough to have called out the National Guard to defend their city hall. Down in Auburndale, I think they only needed General Van Fleet to protect their city hall. And Winter Haven, you just went to jail. So I had fun pulling these pictures up and trying to interpret them and look at them. So much fun was had, and this happened on different occasions, again, throughout the year. Also, the Citrus Festival that year is when the Gary Moore Show, y'all remember that, some of you? A nationally televised television variety show came to Cypress Gardens during our centennial year, and also Carol Burnett was there, and grand events and things were happening this whole year. So all you had to do is watch the newspaper, and about every month in some city here in Polk County, there was a celebration. This is what the county, this was kind of a montage or an image of Polk County in 1961. Now you'll notice that we had a Phosphate Valley exposition, a brand new museum out on Highway 60. It was the greatest place for fishing. That's probably Lake Alfred there with the big bass. Of course, Beauties in Cypress Gardens. We had in Lake Wales was the Masterpiece Gardens and the Singing Tower, Bach Tower. And of course, the old county courthouse as it was decked out at Christmas in all its finery. It was a great day in Polk County. I might add, because I lived through it and attended quite a few of those things, it was a great year for a young man to absorb and to live and to grow up in this great county. And all of it was a result of a vision of the Polk County Historical Commission. Kick-started the whole celebration. Well, let's get back to the library. The library collection outgrew the 3 rooms it had occupied since the 1950s, and it necessitated a request for more space. In 1974, the library was moved into a house on the corner of Hendry Avenue and Boulevard here in Bartow. Now, the old law library gave 3 rooms to the historical library at the time. My wife looked at this and she said, let's see here, let's go forward again. She said, well, is this the rooms here? That looks like there. I said, no, actually it's from here up. These are ground windows, and if you go up on the 3rd floor, that's the only light that went into those 3 rooms on the corner. And that's where the library was located when I started doing research in 1970. Stevie Lou Powell then was the librarian there, and in 1974 or 73, she was appointed as the county historian. She also made the move to this place. That's the old place. It's no longer there. I think it's a parking lot today. That was at one time the Historical and Genealogical Library, and everything happened right there. The same year, 1974, June 23rd, 41 history-loving individuals, including the Historical Commission, met to organize the Polk County Historical Association, who are the hosts and sponsors of this Lunch and Learn. Glenn Hooker of Haines City was chosen president. Charter membership concluded at the end of the year, finding the Historical Commission and Association working together to achieve common goals. Historical Commissioner, journalist, and historian Louise Frisbee became the first editor of the association's quarterly. Retired educator Elizabeth Shoemate Brown was the first secretary. Now, in research as early as 1956, remember the original Historical Commission were the county commissioners. In 1956, they started opening up and broadening membership on the commission to associate membership. The first associate and honorary members to the Historical Commission for Polk County was Spessard Holland, our native son and U.S. Senator, and D.B. McKay, a historian and journalist from the Tampa Tribune. They were appointed first. What followed was within each county district, associate members were appointed to sit with the commission. So a body of additional people are now attending the commission meetings starting in 1956. Now, somewhere in the 60s, that kind of tracked out and lost sight of it until 74, when it was expanded to meet the mission and goal and intent of the original charter of the Historical Commission. 2 of the Historical Commission's mandates were met that year. One was the Historical Library had been formed and was going well, and now the Historical Association. In 1984, plans were announced for construction of a new library and museum. This complex would house the county archives, Historical and Genealogical Library, with the addition of a museum. Architectural drawings and a model of that were executed. To commence building, Clerk of the Court Bud Dixon, a member of the Historical Commission and Association, appealed to the public for funding to reach a goal of $1.5 million. A site, not this site, but previous to this, was picked where the Bartow Public Library now sits, to be a new museum and library complex. The project involved raising funds. The property was secured. An initial investment by the association provided finances to start construction. The building project stalled. Funds dwindled when this courthouse, the 9-story courthouse, went south. Remember, it had some problems with ceiling and all the roofs and all that, and the county stopped everything, and everything was put into the new building over there, and the project to build a new historical library, association headquarters, and museum stalled, dwindled, and reverted back to the city of Bartow. We never qualified for a matching grant. By 1987, a two-story concrete skeleton building and hoped for county funding was not realized. But the same year in '87, the domed 1908 courthouse ceased to function as an active court facility. Because of the new courthouse, everything from here was being transferred over. Wow, now we have something to look at. So the idea from the old skeleton down where the public library now sits, the idea was moved to house right here where you're sitting today, the association headquarters, the library, and a museum complex. County Judge Richard Prince, while renovating his personal home, found the original 1908 blueprints to this building, enabling Architects Hammer in Tampa. Is it Tom Hammer, Murtis, is his name?
Yes, sir.
Tom Hammer, architect who's a architect that does renovations and restoration to period pieces, took over the helm, and with the original blueprints, created this fine, beautiful 1920s courthouse like it never looked before. It was decided that the 1908 courthouse would house all historical activities, libraries, offices, museum. A professional museum curator was employed to oversee development of the museum. The library was relocated to the northwest wing of the building, and offices for the Historical Association were provided. The library was well established, but the museum was lacking items. So Historical Commissioner William Ruster, Bill Ruster, and the curator began collecting exhibits. A $600,000 taxidermic collection was donated. I was involved with Bud Dixon to obtain a military collection, and on January 25th, 1989, the Historical Commission dedicated the Genealogical Library Museum right here at the 1908 courthouse. Bud Dixon, who was recognized as that voice in the wilderness, seeing they wanted to tear this down and make a parking lot, he kind of was the voice in the wilderness to say, oh, it's too beautiful to lose. He saved this iconic building from being razed to create a parking lot, and the commission later dedicated the central rotunda to his memory in 2003. The next year, 1990, saw the Historical Commission rededicating this place, noted on the National Register of Historical Places, and also at that same time frame started developing historic Homeland Heritage Park. And I invite you to go visit down there. Great things are happening. Now, another long-time goal came to fruition with the grand opening of the Historical Museum on September 19th and 20th, 1998. We had the library here, and now we have the museum. In 2003, the Historical Commission aggressively pursued another marker program, placement of new markers. There was a surge in it that has not stopped or abated since. Starting in that year, the old Polk County Courthouse marker was put up. A marker at two markers in Winter Haven for Pewsville, an early African-American community. The Florence Villa Training School, also an African-American historical site. Kissingen Springs, which you see there, was in 2011. The site of Sumica, a former sawmill and town. Circle B-Bar Ranch, the 1928 Surveyors Lake Schoolhouse, the mining community of Pierce, the Carpenter's Home, and soon to be announced activity will be placement of a marker at the site of the first Publix in Winter Haven. And if you're interested in historical markers, check us out on our website. We're available to help you meet that end. Well, what rolled around now was our 150th anniversary. That's called a sesquicentennial. Polk Proud was adopted as the alliterative co-name, since they were saying it was a Sasquatch this, and the sesquicentennial seemed too hard to pronounce, so we made it easy. Polk Proud 150. And all over the county again, but perhaps not quite as grand as before, the celebration took hold, and again the county celebrated its 150th anniversary. Members of the Sesquicentennial Committee included members of the Historical Commission. They were County Commissioner Ed Smith, County Judge Robert Griffin, Clerk of the Court Richard Weiss, Gay Finkelman, S.L. Frisbee IV, myself, Dr. Herbert Nigg, Tim Pospickle, George L. Duke Burr, Elaine Grimes, and Jim Watkins from the Kathleen area. Honorary members were appointed representing each district from each of the commissioners' districts. The kickoff was on February the 8th, 2011. 50 years after the grand celebration, we're having another one right here. There was a larger celebration would be held the very next couple days later. There was a color guard, bands, bagpipes, cattle, antique trucks, autos, whip crapping, vendors, a choir. The choir actually sang the official Polk Proud 150 song that had been commissioned by the Historical Commission. We had a song written and produced by the Harrison Arts students. Well, it was a chilly morning that greeted the commencement of the 150th anniversary. Opening prayer was by Shane Rodriguez, pastor of the county's oldest church, Peace Creek Baptist. Pledge of Allegiance by Sheriff Grady Judd. Sesquicentennial Chairman myself brought greetings from the commission, and Commissioner Ed Smith, dressed in period garb, complete with a top hat, sporting quite the look, brought greetings from the Board of County Commissioners. The keynote speaker was Adam Putnam, our own son again, who at that time is and still is Commissioner of Agriculture and former Congressman. The County Commission approved funds for the Sesquicentennial celebration, and it included a special float. Now, if you see here, this looks familiar, doesn't it? This was a very nice float, and it had a replica of the History Center. And so, with that, was this 2 or 3 different parades throughout the county through that year that the official float was put into, I think? 5, okay. Thank you, Murtis. Yeah, at least 5 parades throughout our county, the official Polk 150 Proud float took place in. There were other celebrations as well, fans, contests, stuff that was interactive with students in every school, and it as well was also, I will call it, a grand celebration. And perhaps there was a 6 or 7-year-old out there whose interest in history was also sparked by that celebration. On June the 11th, 2012, the old courthouse, museum, and library were renamed. Thanks, Murtis. The Polk County History Center, heralded by a prominent sign on the center's northwest lawn. We actually now came under a new designation, the Polk County History Center. In 2014, the Historical Commission adopted an official logo, our first one. Before that, we always used the county emblem. Now we have our very own. Notice that it does reflect Polk County Historical Commission. It has our birthday and our initials and the History Center's iconic dome, the 1908 courthouse. And I want to point out something to you, because what was that date I told you were going to remember? May the 4th. So I was instrumental in the design, so I have to tell you this, that I like sneaking stuff in. The time is 5:04. 5:04. So wherever our emblem goes, you always know our story. On May the 4th, 1937, we were established. So the Historical Commission celebrates its 80th anniversary on May the 4th, 2017. Our mission statement sums it up with this continuing commitment by your Historical Commission. I read, "We, the Polk County Historical Commission, exist to authenticate, preserve, and promote the history of the Polk County region through self-involvement and leadership, by increasing public support and offering historical programs for a multicultural society. So I might add, it's time to celebrate. Happy 80th anniversary. Happy 80th birthday wishes to the Polk County Historical Commission. And thank you, Commission, for your many endeavors already realized and the many to come. If there are any historical commissioners or staff members, could you stand up right now and let's just recognize you for a minute? If you could stand up, commissioners, and that's also the association as well. Let's give them a round of applause. I've got one more sentence, Murtis, because I want you to notice that I had to stand out here and took note that I think our clock, the bell, I think is 2 minutes slow. But notice this was taken yesterday afternoon at 5:04 p.m. So we, the citizens of Polk County, continue to have a firm future built on a great and a fantastic past. So in closing today, many thanks to the Polk County Historical Association and the Historical Commission for sponsoring our history and this event. God bless you all, and I'll take any questions or answers if we have time. Thank you.